Hey friends, it's Holly from Chic Antique and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be creating a bone inlay look on these nesting tables. I got these for free, so I thought I would try a new technique that I've never tried before. This bone inlay look has been pretty trendy for the last couple months, so I thought I would give it a try. A couple of other YouTubers have created videos on this, xoxo, Salvaged by K. Scott, and a few others. So if you want to check out their videos too, I'll have those linked in the description, but let's go ahead and get started. These were a little bit wobbly, so I'm going to tighten up the legs and see if that helps. Luckily that did the trick, so we're gonna go ahead and start cleaning next. For my cleaner today, I'll be using White Lightning by Dixie Belle. This is a TSP cleaner and it's gonna remove any residue on the piece that's gonna prevent the paint from adhering properly. After wiping everything down with TSP, I'm going to come back with clean water and wipe that off. These did have a little bit of a shine to them and did have a couple scratches, so I'm going to use 220 grit sandpaper, not only to scuff the surface, but remove any of those surface scratches. This is going to help the paint adhere really well to the surface. If you don't scuff sand shiny surfaces like this, your paint is not going to be durable and it's not going to last. It's going to scrape off and chip a lot easier, so I always recommend scuff sanding. Then I'm going to remove all that dust first with a microfiber rag, and then I'll come back with a tack cloth and remove anything that's left over. I'm going to be painting these black, so I'll be using Anchor in Dixie Belle's Silk All-in-One Mineral Paint line. With all-in-one mineral paints, most people suggest using a synthetic brush to get less brush strokes, but in my experience with small legs like this, I have a harder time using a synthetic brush because they're not very stiff, so I actually end up overworking the paint, which causes brush strokes. So I like to use this Annie Sloan Natural Bristle Brush, which allows me to apply the paint quicker and prevents overbrushing. So that's why I always say figure out what techniques work best for you, because what works for someone else or almost everybody who uses this paint, it may not work for you. So you have to use trial and error and figure out what works best for you and what you prefer, because it may be different than most people. So for me, it's more important to use a dense brush, even though this one has natural bristles, because it's more important for me not to overwork the paint than it is to use synthetic bristles. And now I'm going in for that second coat. This paint does need to dry for 2 hours before you recoat it, and that is because this paint takes longer to dry, and also when it's drying, that's when it starts to self-level. So it smooths out on its own, and if the paint isn't completely dry when you recoat it, it's going to add more brush strokes. So you do need to wait those 2 hours before you recoat it. And since I painted these upside down, after I do 2 coats on the bottom, I'm going to flip it over so I can paint the top. And again, I'm still using that Annie Sloan brush because I want to be able to get this paint on quickly and smooth it out fast. And in my experience, that is what prevents brush strokes. If you do end up getting brush strokes, you can always sand in between coats, which is what I'm going to do. After letting that paint dry for 2 hours on the top, I did come back with 220 grit sandpaper just to smooth out any texture I got in the paint. Then I wiped back the dust with a tack cloth and then went in for my second coat of paint. After letting the black paint dry really well, I'm going to come back and start doing my stenciling. I got this stencil from Michael's. I believe it was $18. This is the one that Salvage by Case got used in her bone inlay video. So I decided that I would give it a try. It comes with a bunch of sheets, so you can customize the look just the way you want, which I really like. So I'm going to start with this large one in the center, and I'm going to use these small sponges to apply the paint. And for my color, I'm going to be using Saltwater in the Silk Mineral Paint line. I'm going to secure the edges of the stencil with some painter's tape. That way my stencil doesn't move around while I'm applying the paint. In all the videos I watched, everyone recommended using light coats, almost dry brushing kind of with the paint to make sure that your stencil doesn't bleed. And honestly, I thought I wasn't using too much, but on this stencil in particular, my first one, I did use too much paint. So I will say, really use a lot less paint than you think you need. If you don't like the coverage you get with a really light coat, you can always come back when the paint is dry. You can leave the stencil there and then add another coat of paint, a very light one, so that you get more coverage. But you don't want to put it on too heavily because the paint is going to seep and bleed through those lines. And then immediately after applying the paint, I removed the stencil. There were areas that I needed to clean up, so I did that with the black paint and cleaned up any edges where the paint bled through. I just didn't show it on camera. Now I'm going to go in for this corner piece. I'm trying a different technique. So first I'm applying some flat clear coat on the stencil and I'm going to let that dry. And that kind of creates a barrier so that your paint is less likely to bleed through the stencil. And this was the best way I found to prevent that bleed through. So using a clear coat first, allowing that to dry, and also applying a very light amount of paint at a time. I thought on this corner I would try a cosmetic sponge from the Dollar Tree, but I didn't like this either. So I would use those sponges that I was using earlier. That's what I would recommend, and also use clear coat first. This just applied too much paint and it pulled up on the stencil when I was pressing it down. Even though I had it taped down, it still pulled it up, which I didn't like. You can kind of see that lifting happening here. The sponge was also too big, so I got a lot of extra paint around the stencil that I had to clean up. You can see how much bleed through there is there. And for some reason I didn't learn my lesson and I used the cosmetic sponge on this corner too. And again, it bled through, so I do not recommend these for the stencil. You are more than welcome to try them. Like I said, it may not work for me, but it could work for you. Who knows? Now I'm going to keep putting down different stencils and applying more paint and see how that goes so we can just enjoy the process. And then this was the smaller table. I used that same large stencil in the center, and then I used 2 small line stencils on each side. Now, after letting these stencils dry really well, I'm going to come back and seal everything with Dixie Belle's Clear Coat in flat. Dixie Belle's silk paint does have a built-in top coat, but I really want this stencil to be very durable, as well as the whole table, I guess. So I'm sealing everything with this flat clear coat just to add more durability to the finish. And I did 2 coats of this. This clear coat does have a slight white look to it when you first apply it, and it may look super sloppy and have a lot of brush strokes at first, but it does level out on its own and dry crystal clear. It's almost invisible. It doesn't add any sheen. It looks like there's no clear coat at all, which I really like. So don't worry if your clear coat looks sloppy. Just smooth it out as best as you can and it'll level out on its own. And I'm using my Dixie Belle flat medium brush to apply this. And now that this project is complete, I just want to remind you what we started out with. And here's how it looks now. Thank you all so much for joining me on this makeover today. I really hope you enjoyed it. I had a really fun time trying a new technique, something I've never tried before, and I'm really pleased with the result. I think it's very beautiful and very different. If you enjoy this style of content, make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell. That way you're notified every time I upload. And check out some of my other videos before you leave as well. I think you might enjoy my most recent upload. I'll have that linked in the eye above, as well as down below in the description. And if you have any idea of how I should price these, let me know in the comments. I would love to know what this would sell for in your area. So leave me a comment letting me know what you would sell these for and what city and state you're located in. I'm very curious. Again, I thank you guys so much for joining me on this makeover today. I really appreciate your support, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Why? This is what you have to do when there's 15-mile-an-hour winds.